It's alright, I have so much money in it. I just want to make some money. I didn't move, like I was stuck in a chair and bed for about 2 months. And I went from keto to eating like the microwave food that my dad and brother were making for me. I couldn't cook, so everything was part-time.
Very part-time until June 1st. So I've been here pretty much every weekday now. That's the halfway through that process. Yeah.
I don't know why.
You've already built some websites and stuff.
But that was me. Early 30s. I think I realized I we're not going to go there anymore.
So,
I'd say I'm old now, but I'm really not that much older.
you know, it's just a different phase of where you are. Yeah.
Well, what I need to do is go keto and stop eating tortillas. So what told you, did you teach her?
The Delphin.
You have no money.
Shared it. It's a 40
wants to do is make delicious Mexican
it's pretty, the kids are all learning music graduation, graduate, anytime some class or when I was a teacher, I would have 20 kids, they've got a checklist, I just run it down the checklist. And I help them when they're stuck and stuff. Just not really everything.
Yeah, there's that too. I figure once I get better
Last job I was writing, I was in one course, but I put a lot of work into that, and I just kept doing that stuff foundation. That really, if you're up on
John, can I see where you guys are going to be standing?
trigonometry and you're still like in solving for extra. You know, like, okay, so that's where we're going. So I did best I could in the last 6 months.
So I'm just going to
Just each section said, well, so I kind of got to do the whole thing, and I felt very that's about all I had. You live there, you got 3 rooms.
I went to college.
And so that all added up to a pretty good teacher's revenue. To just pay with
Hey, John.
Ready to go.
No. You have a card reader? Probably one in the case.
Having this
Probably.
retirement.
And so it really wasn't.
Look at all this.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Oh, this is fun. I've had a lot of really cool moments since we started this school 5 years ago. This is one of the coolest. We've got a phenomenal team here from Microsoft, and you're going to hear some really, really cool technical data about a product they created called LiveShare. But I also just want to take this opportunity just to thank the organization as a whole and the people I've worked with over the last couple of days. As a developer for many years, I'm unbelievably impressed with what Microsoft has done to service us as technology professionals. They have a lot of consumer products, we're probably all familiar with a lot of them, right? but in terms of the people that actually do the job of technology, they really get us. And it worked really, really hard for a number of years to create tools and processes and services oriented around what we really do for a living. So we've got some people that are involved right in the forefront of that, talking about a product that really just came out of beta like in the last couple of weeks. And I think you're going to enjoy it. But it's an opportunity for you guys also to get inside, what it's like to be at a large technology company. And it's very, developer-centric in what they do. I think you'll enjoy it. So normally when I introduce people, I'm pretty good. I got the names all down, but there's 3 of them. There's a Dutch word in here that I hope I'm not going to mispronounce terribly. So I'm going to introduce the 3 people we're going to have talking about LiveShare, all right? So we have John Chu, he's a program manager. If any of you have done a little bit of work in figuring out, what this LiveShare thing is all about, you may have seen a video of him where they demonstrate it. Dayton Elminger, who is a developer at Microsoft, and Anthony Vanderhorn, a developer at Microsoft. I also interviewed those last 2 gentlemen for a podcast just a few minutes ago. So if you get a chance to go onto iTunes and look at the podcast, in about a week you'll see the podcast from them. I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, please help me welcome John, Dayton, and Anthony.
Thanks very much, everyone. I really appreciate you coming along and having a look at what we're going to be showing you here at LiveShare.
For just a moment so we can get audio recording so we can mic up.
Cool. So we will start in just a sec. I'll tell some funny jokes in the meantime. Why'd the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side. See, they teach us how to be comedians, how to be proud and entertained, and so I'm really good at that.
How long have you worked at Microsoft?
So going on about 3 years.
Oh, okay. And where are you from?
Originally Brisbane, Australia. And so I've had a little bit of an eclectic trip to get to where I am today. And so it was interesting. I actually started out when I was going to leave high school to be a cabinet maker. And so I hadn't touched computers before all through high school. Turning one on was as much as I could do. And I was about 2 or 3 weeks from graduating when I decided, well, I want to make $1,000 a week, okay? And, because 50 grand, that's a lot of money, right? And I said, okay, so I want to build tables, and I want to build one-off pieces of furniture. And I want this table to take, 3 to 6 months to build. So I've got to sell a table in Australia for 25 grand. And I was like, I really don't think that's going to happen. And so at that point I was like, I think computers is pretty cool. And so let's give it a go. And so I went to the equivalent of community college in Australia to start with. And I did a 2-year diploma there. And changed 3 or 4 different times. Originally I was going to build computers, then I decided I was going to be a network engineer, then I was deciding security. People care about security, that's going to be a thing. And then once I started, it was like, okay, anyone who does security has got like a PhD and is like 50. Security's not going to be a thing, I don't want to do a PhD. And then eventually I landed on software development, and that was probably in the last 6 months that I was there. And at least for me, it just flowed. Like, the moment I started writing software, it was like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And so at that point, I finished up the course and got a job in the real world. And it was over the summer, and I decided I wanted to go to university. And so I kept working for the next 4 years, did university part-time, and then came out. And because I would give the credit to the fact that I knew that that's what I wanted to do. That I pretty much topped the university in software development, and enjoyed it ever since. And so, but anyway, this is John, and so John, as we said before, John's one of the program managers on the team. I'm one of the lead software developers on the team, and so we'll be going through LiveShare and kind of like our thought process behind building the product.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we good on the sound check?
Yeah, I think we're good. Sounding good.
It's a movie star now. Cool. So yeah, like Anthony mentioned, we wanted to kind of show you about LiveShare, and over the past, since yesterday, we've been talking to a lot of you, seeing a couple of familiar faces out in the crowd, and hearing about how your experience going through the Tech Academy and your experience going through a coding school and the experience as a student, but also as an instructor. And hearing about the different frustrations or pain points that you go through, as a student, like to be able to better learn how to be a developer and such. And when like going through all this, like I think one of the things that became really cool that we kind of noticed is that we have a product LiveShare, and we'll tell you a little bit more about it, but I think it'd be really helpful for all of you as students or as instructors to be able to collaborate more effectively, be able to pick up and like learn context for when it comes to coding a little bit more easily. So, so to kind of like make it a little bit more relevant to everyone in this crowd, so we've been talking to a lot of you, and some of the things that have become a little bit more apparent as we were talking was that there's a couple of pain points when it comes to the education aspects of when it comes for instructors or even students that sometimes like certain technologies certain technologies fall a little bit short. So one of the big things is setting up the environment. We've heard a lot about how and then everyone has probably run into the case where, oh, I run it, it doesn't work on my machine, and then you send it over to someone else, you send it to the instructor or someone, and they're like, it works fine, I don't know what's going on there. So there's like a lot of like back and forth about trying to figure out what's wrong with your environment, what's wrong with your IDE, and see like why is this one setting that's making it a little bit difficult to be able to see like make it run properly. And that's like aside from like things like syntax errors or anything else, it's just purely a setup aspect. The other one is that when it comes to instructors, helping students get full helping students, whether or not you're remote or you're in person, it can be a little bit difficult to get full context. So when a student comes up and they're saying like, I'm running into this issue, I have this error and such, we've heard that, oh, you use things like screen sharing or sending screenshots. And in a way, like there's like a little bit of a back and forth that you have to go through to kind of describe what the issue is that you're running into. It's like, I see this error, or can you look at this window and try to figure out what's going on there? And it's being able to share that full context where like you as a student, and see like, and being able to say like, this is where I'm having these issues, and being able to share that with the instructor would be really helpful to make it a little bit more easy to be able to understand and more quickly address the issues that you're facing. The last one is like kind of related to this, like one of the solutions that I've heard that not just here, but in general, a lot of people when it comes to development have started using things like screen sharing. So Screenleaf, Google Hangouts, or Skype and whatnot, like you use screen sharing technologies to share your screen. But it comes with like a lot of high bandwidth, where sometimes you get some really choppy things where you're talking to someone and they start suddenly cutting out, and it's all jerky and everything, and then you also have like the pixelated screens and everything, and it kind of becomes hard like when you're saying like this exact line right here, this is where the issue is. It's like I can't tell, it's all pixelated. That's kind of where we've seen like a lot of issues with screen sharing technologies because it requires so much bandwidth. So, and like making this a little bit more broad in terms of like these are all like different issues that you face like when it comes to collaborating, when it's a student to an instructor, student to student, and these aren't just like. This isn't just like bound to you right now as students. Like out in the real world with like developers, like collaboration in the real world. Like I've heard like people using quotes because we're all in the real world. So because like out there, you hear a lot of like difficulties when it comes to collaborating. We have teams, and as there's a lot of companies out there that have teams that are remote and such, and being able to collaborate effectively has become even more important. So we've seen like there's a lot of things that have emerged that make collaboration and being able to collaborate effectively with your teammates more important. Like the first one is context is key when wrapping up. So say you're coming in as a junior dev onto a team, and there's this giant code base, and you're trying to understand what's going on with it, and there's so many files in it, and just like you want to sit down with someone for them to be able to explain what's going on in that code base, and you want to see like, oh, why are you using this function? Why do you use this library? And being able to wrap up on that is like really important for you to be able to start like contributing to the code base, to be able to submit your pull requests and whatnot. So, and beyond that, like knowledge can become lost in the noise. There's a lot of times where you notice that there's like this tribal knowledge aspects where people become like very experts in certain areas in the code base. Like this person is really like specialized in just the database aspects, and this person is really specialized in the networking aspect, and like they become very like secure in their roles, and like sometimes you get a bug assigned to you, and then you hop in and you're like, I don't know what's going on in this code because like someone else has that knowledge, maybe that person is no longer on the team, and you're just trying to figure out what exactly is going on. So having to be able to like get that context of like what's going on there, and being able to get that knowledge that might not necessarily be shared is really important when you're collaborating. Beyond that, like I said before, teams are becoming more geo-distributed. As now it's becoming like a much bigger trend as teams and development teams are widespread across the globe. So yeah, people in different countries or cities and whatnot, they're in different time zones. And what used to be like something where you would like pull up your chair like right up to a desk and be like, hey, let's sit down and work on this together. It's not really as simple anymore because someone's sleeping at the same time, like that you're awake and that you're developing, or you're not able to, and you're trying to use screen sharing technologies, and you don't get that full experience of someone sitting next to you and you're able to pair program. And then so like that leads into like aspects where team cohesion can suffer, where sometimes as people who work remote, sometimes it can start to feel a little bit distant, where like you're not able to get the full idea of what's going on and why certain things happen, where like you're in a team room and a lot of decisions when it comes to development come down to like just like talking across the rooms, like, oh, I think we should do this, and you have those ad hoc conversations, and like when you're remote, you don't necessarily get to see that. So like sometimes teams cannot be as cohesive when you don't have that effective collaboration. And lastly, release velocity is increasing. So in a world where we're always deploying web apps and whatnot, and you're deploying your applications up to the cloud and for services and everything, it becomes more important as like we're quickly iterating. So like you want to be able to get in quickly, understand the bugs that you're facing, and quickly fix them so you can deploy a fix easily to production. So with all that, like you need to be able to collaborate effectively. So how does that all lead into what do developers do today? And so when I talk about like there's certain solutions out there in the market when it comes to collaboration, and how do people currently solve collaboration issues? And we mentioned before screen sharing, and screen sharing is great for like a lot of different reasons. You're able to show your screen, you're able to see your mouse, you're able to show all the windows that are within your desktop. But at the same time, you're seeing all the windows. In some cases, you're seeing a desktop and you don't really want like all the other programs that are running on the screen. And it's very inherently one-directional, like where like someone takes control and then they're controlling the screen, or the other person is taking control as well. So this is like you're dictating who is in control of like the screen sharing session, as opposed to something where like you're trying to collaborate and you're having this back and forth and you're being able to talk with each other and control like at your own pace. Version control. So I've heard that like you're all like very efficient at GitHub. And so with GitHub, and you're pushing up to version control, you're making commits and everything. It's really important. It's really big for like, it's part of the current workflow when it comes to development. You're always pushing and committing, and then you're pushing it up to prod. But the thing with that is that when you're submitting pull requests or commits, this isn't really real time. When you say you run into an issue, and I've heard this like when we were talking to some of you about how sometimes you run into an issue and then you say like, okay, push it up to GitHub, and then you're pushing code that might not necessarily work onto your repo, and that might not necessarily be the right coding practice. You want to have like good coding practices where you're pushing up things that work properly. In order to collaborate on that, it's not real time. There's a little bit of an asynchronous aspect to it. You're pushing, waiting for someone to pull it down, look at it, send comments back, and send it back. And the last one is snippet sharing. So like this kind of falls under like sending screenshots or just copying and pasting this and sending it over email. So in a way, like this helps, and you're able to see the code as well. But in a way, like you're not getting the full context of like this snippet of code, this line of code. Where does it fall within the greater context of your project? Where is it within a file? Like where is it used? Where else in the project? You're not able to understand that. And so and then the last one, like for collaboration, is traditional pair programming. And sometimes this isn't so. When we say traditional pair programming, we're saying someone pulls up a chair, plugs in their keyboard and mouse, and you have two keyboards going on at the same time in your code, and you're dictating back and forth, saying like, okay, like what about this method? And you're trying to go through and implement these functions. And sometimes, and like we said before, like with geo-distributed teams, this isn't necessarily possible. So with that, so that's how that all leads into all these issues that we heard. Like we talked to a lot of customers and hearing it from these teams and asking them like, oh, what is your current biggest pain point when it comes to collaborating and just collaboration in general and working in these kinds of teams? And it became very apparent that there's this gap in collaboration and being able to answer those kinds of issues. So we kind of started making this product called LiveShare. And what is LiveShare? It's real-time collaborative development from your favorite tools. And I can break that down in terms of what exactly that is, and then we'll also do a demo. So real-time, so this kind of answers the issues that we had with version control, where like you want someone's help immediately. You want that ad hoc jumping onto someone's desk and somebody coming to your computer to be able to help you immediately. Collaborative development. So you're actually both in this code. You're both collaborating, you're fixing issues, and you're figuring it out. And from the comfort of your favorite tools. So from what I've heard, you're all using Visual Studio. I've heard other people using VS Code, and you're able to configure it. So I'll go in and I'll go like, what is happening? Oops. Oh. A little bit of a slow VS right now. We've all been there.
So we're remoting everything across, and in terms of the different things that you can do, not only can the two of us type at the same time, okay, but we can also do other things at the same time, okay, so like language completion issues. Okay, so what I can do is I can go, in this case, we might have app, is one of my variables that I'm using. Now, of course, on my machine, you'd expect to be able to go app dot and see the list of completions that run there. But I can actually, on the remote machine, get that same list of completions for any particular variable that you might have issues with. Yeah, so it's not a text-only experience. It's much richer than that. And that's one of the things that makes this a little bit more difficult than just like Google Docs or Office Online, where you've got multiple people collaborating on the same document. At the same time, we can debug. And we'll see this in a sec, where yes, I've set a breakpoint. You might have observed that we saw the breakpoint on John's machine as well. Okay, but at the same time, I can press play. Okay, and we'll both hit that same breakpoint at the exact same time. Okay, and when that happens, we can both independently inspect variables. Okay, and so see what a list equals. And I'm looking at the 10th item in the list, and John might be looking at the 3rd item in the list. Okay, but more than that, we can independently navigate around. Okay, so John isn't bound by the particular file that I have open. Okay, so he can choose to go to another file. Another thing we can do is follow. Okay, so let's say I have the problem, and I'm say to John, hey, follow me, please. And as I navigate around the solution, his VS will automatically jump wherever I go, seeing wherever my cursor goes, and seeing that. And then it might be, okay, John's like, okay, I think I know the problem. Switch and follow me. And so now I'll be following him, jumping around my solution and jumping around my files as we make changes together. Or maybe we're independently doing something, okay? And then all of a sudden he's like, ooh, you come to me, okay, over here. He can summon me to come over, okay, and pull me over to where he is as well. So there's a few different things that we can do that you kind of expect from this sort of experience to make it much more high fidelity. Yes?
Is this peer-to-peer, or are you going to do a cloud? Because you're
That's a really good question.
Visual Studio.
Yes,
how
really
would a corporate company, let's say Exxon, which doesn't allow external access, how would they protect their data so that Microsoft doesn't have access?
So I think there's a few things wrapped up in what you said there. One is, do we do peer-to-peer or do we go through the cloud? The answer is both. We support both. So the initial brokering is done in the cloud, i.e., like, hey, look, is there a session that's being shared? Is John online at the moment? That sort of thing. So basic questions that have nothing to do with the actual code itself, okay? And then there's, okay, let these two people connect, okay? And so when it comes to those two people connecting, unless you've got some weird configuration set up, by default, we'll try and directly connect to that person. So we happen to be on the same network at the moment, so chances are we'll actually connect directly to each other, okay? So in that case, none of the cloud's going, none of the source code or bytes or anything like this is going anywhere near the cloud. Now let's say for whatever reason I was at home, John's here, we can't get a direct connection. We do go through the cloud. Now, even in that point, and this has been security reviewed up the wazoo, your code never, in its raw form, never communications or anything. So yeah, and so as John gets set up here,
I was on the VS. And so like, as we saw before, like I was connected in, and it jumps to the file that he currently has open, and you mentioned. So we can show like a little bit of what goes on, like what is happening behind the scenes as that's happening. So
yeah, and the other cool thing here is that my solution might be thousands and thousands of files in size, but we'll only ever show or pull down the file that you currently happen to be looking at. Okay, so it's extremely quick. So it's not like switching branches and waiting for the branch switch to occur and all this sort of stuff. Also, John never has to commit up his code, or I never have to commit up to the state that I am. So typically when I need help, I'm not at a point where I want to check in. You know, I don't want to air my dirty laundry to other people into the commit history. Okay, and so I don't even need to click save. Okay, on what's on my machine here. Okay, I can just say, let's start a sharing session, and John will join straight into the point that I'm currently at.
Yeah, so let's show a little bit of like following. So,
and remember, this is all John. So the code lives on my machine here. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where voodoo black magic is about to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I recall, one of the things I got when I migrated from VS 2015 to 2017 was C# 6.0, no coalescent operator, for example.
Yeah.
So if you're on 2017, John's in 2015, and you've got no coalescent.
So that's a good question, and that's really easy for us to answer because we don't support 2015.
This is only 2017 update 6.
But is the IntelliSense based on his local server?
No, it's based on the host. And this is one of the great things about what we're doing here is, let's say, how many people are familiar with VS Code? Okay, so VS Code is a very lightweight editor that Microsoft makes in accompaniment to VS. And the idea is that it's much more pick and choose what you want. So VS comes with a lot, okay, out of the box, and you can still pick and choose to a certain degree, but you get a lot, you know, out of the box. It's not just a basic text editor. Whereas VS Code says, we're not even going to give you C# out of the box, okay? So let's pretend I'm on holidays, okay? And I've just got my wife's computer, okay? It doesn't have any development environment set up. And John's back in the office with VS, the full thing, and he's like, I need some help, man. Like, this is really going bad. And I go, okay, let me just download VS Code, okay? And without even the C# extension set up on my machine, he can send me a link, and I'm using the power of his machine and the environment that he's got installed to do everything. So I'll get C# completions, C# syntax highlighting, all this sort of stuff, because it's his machine that's controlling that experience and resolving those sorts of things for us.
And how that like comes into play with like at the Tech Academy, like because it's all on in that scenario, it was all on my machine. There was no need for him to set up anything. He didn't need to set up his VS or VS Code. He didn't need to download any packages. Like if we were working on a Node project, he wouldn't even have to download Node because it's all being forwarded over. So in this case, like right now, like I clicked on this avatar up here for Anthony, and now I'm following him. So what he can do is he navigates around to different projects, different files in the solution. Oh, I'm not following actually. Let me click on that. Okay, there we go. So like now that I'm following, it follows along as he navigates into project. He's able to show me, like, say he's facing this issue. He can hop around to the different files in the solution, show me where the issue he thinks is happening, go to different files, and I'm able to see what's going on there.
Okay, so as you can see, I'm getting the completion list here of everything that I need. John, can you see if you get a completion list on our side?
So, wait, give it a second. All right, let me check out that. Oh yeah, well, it was there. Slow IntelliSense right now. So,
okay, so this is the IntelliSense completion list that we're seeing here. Okay, and all of that's being forwarded over to my machine. Now, one of the cool things about what we're doing here is we've even had reports of people like helping out on a session who are in a plane. Okay, and you're like, well, how does that work? Well, it turns out to do what we're doing here, we're just sending like characters, across very small payloads with, hey, this is what you should populate in this list and whatever else, which is very different from a screen sharing experience. In a screen sharing experience, we're literally sending, 60 frames a second or 30 frames a second of video, over the wire to try and keep up with everything that's going on. And they've got optimization algorithms and stuff in there, but at the end of the day, you're still transferring images, okay? Whereas we're just transferring text to go back and forth. So it can support a pretty rich and high-fidelity experience on this. So something else that we can do is we can still navigate around and go through all the sorts of things that we would have come to love and expect, i.e. go to definition, peak, and all these different things. And then we can even invite other people into the session as well. And so
we'll do that with the Node one.
You want to do that with the Node one?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that with the Node one.
With debugging.
Okay. So one of the other things that I want to do here is start debugging. Okay. And so you can see on my side, I've started debugging. Okay, and it's going through the build process.
And even beyond that,
and
you see on my
can
side, I see the build
that
output.
he started getting the build output on his side. Now, the other thing that we just saw there, okay, is that because this is a web app, he's also, it's popped open the browser on my side, and two, it's popped open the browser on John's side. Okay, so we're both getting the browser, okay, because not only are we forwarding, and again, this is hand-wavy voodoo black magic stuff that we're doing here, not only are we forwarding all the commands that VS is doing, okay, if you're familiar with web servers, they expose certain ports. We can forward ports, okay, over the same as encrypted connections and all this sort of stuff from one machine to the other, okay. So in this case, we're using that so we can literally see my browser, okay. Now, there's some funky things that we have in mind for the future. Now, at the moment, he would navigate independently of me, but we can actually do things where I can do, let's say, a key combination on inside of the browser, and his browser will snap to my location. Okay, and I can be typing into my text box in the browser, and it'll type the exact same thing into his text box in his browser. Okay, so extremely high fidelity experience here. And not only if you can forward one port, okay, it turns out you could forward multiple ports. Okay, so let's say SQL Server. Okay, so you've got SQL Server Management Studio that connects to SQL Server on a given port, even on your local machine. If you forward that port through LiveShare, guess what? Your instructor or a fellow student can hook their SQL Server Management Studio up to that port, which looks like a local port to them at that point, okay? And all of a sudden, SQL Server Management Studio will work the way you expected it to, as if the database was on your own machine. And so at this point, you can see we're both broken on the same lines here. I can, go down to other things. We can both look at what these variables equal. I can do that independently of John. John will show that in just a sec. Okay.
Yeah,
and so we've got completely independent navigation here.
Yeah.
Okay?
So this is a case where like an instructor is helping a student and they're running into an issue, so like both of their debuggers are attached to the running app on the student's machine, and the instructor is able to figure out what's going on and independently debug while going through. They can set their own breakpoints to help the student out, figure out where to set things as well. Sets the breakpoint there. And what Anthony can do is he can press continue.
Yeah.
It will load.
And it wants to start the app. That's fine.
Oh, it starting to.
It didn't go to that app.
That's
right.
right.
So yeah, so that's where we're at, and
Yeah.
so this is the sorts of things that you can start doing. In terms of LiveShare.
And even beyond that, like when we a little bit about like within this debugging session itself, we can negotiate control of like stepping through this stuff through this app. So like we set that breakpoint, we can set different breakpoints, and he can step over, I can step over, so we can step through this code synchronously to figure out, get to the right point of where you're facing that issue. And as we can see on my side, I have the front end of the app up as well. It's running. I have that. It's running on the code that's on Anthony's machine.
Yeah, and all of this is being proxied through my machine. So his web requests are treating my computer effectively as a server in that case, just like you would if you deployed a server to the real world. So what we've seen here is all just C#, MVC, vanilla sort of default Microsoft, as it were. Okay, and there's other things that we can do too, which we'll see in the next demo.
Yes.
Which is where we're going to have to take a look at Node.
Yeah.
Okay, so has anyone done any Node development? A couple of people throughout the room. Okay, so we've got two platforms. C# and .NET being one, and Node being another. So just an alternative stack for people who may not want to use MVC, they want to use something else, and so they might want to use Node.
So yeah,
So that's what we're going to take a look at.
One last thing about that is like it's really easy to hop in and exit. Like you saw that we sent that link to leave. I
wanted to terminate the session anyway, and so it's booted him out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And nothing is
no
saved on
longer
my machine.
connected.
Nothing saved there. It was all temporary. It wasn't there. It's not even saved actually. It's not temporary files in general. And so what's next? We have Dayton here. So like what he's going to do is he's going to share out a project, and he has that, and he'll send us the link for this project. Oh, is this one? Yep. Okay. And how about I join in on VS Code? So I can open up my Visual Studio Code. And the beauty of this is, like, as we said before, like it's from the comfort of your own tool. So if you prefer using VS Code and Dayton's on VS Code, someone else could be on VS, like all these different combinations of people can jump into this project from their own editor. So let me open up a new window. I had something already open here. And let me join. Oops. It's still signing in.
It's just signing in. There you go.
Okay, there we go. So yeah, so on that side, it will start joining in, and my VS Code will start up.
And in this case, he's pasted the link directly into the client. Okay, so you could have gone through the web browser if you'd wanted to. It was more convenient to click it. In this case, he happened to copy it.
Yeah.
And so here you go. So now what we've done, again, this magic of this remoting that we're doing, John's machine has requested from Dayton a list of all the files, okay, that are on Dayton's machine, okay, or at least the ones that he's viewing at this particular part in the file tree. Yeah. And we've downloaded the single file that represents the one that's currently in context. So again, pretty quick.
Yeah, but
in
what I
terms of getting that down.
Yeah, and then beyond that, I can explore the project. I can go navigate to another file in the project, like guess what grid, and it will go there while Dayton might be in the other file. So what we can also show is like if you send it to Anthony, if you join in to this one as well. So what Anthony will do is he will join in to the session as well.
Which link is it? This
I think
one?
it's the last one.
Yeah. Ending in B?
It's ending in B, right?
Okay, I'll fix this one here.
And so like beyond that, like this is a Node project, and one of and beyond that, like it's not just bound to C# and Node. Like we've done a lot of work to make sure that LiveShare is universally applicable to all these languages. I've heard that a lot of you have done development with Python, and you're doing CSS and HTML, and beyond that, there's things like Java and C++ and all those other languages. We've made sure that the features that you saw, like the IntelliSense completions and debugging, all that works across all these languages. So whatever you're working on in terms of your project, you're able to collaborate effectively with your team. So now, Anthony's also in the project, so now we have 3 people. And one of the things that I heard from talking to some of you, like talking to Asia about the live project class and how sometimes there's like 5 people and they want to understand what's going on with like this code for your client. And you want to walk through to understand what's going on so you can complete your user stories. So in this way, like what an instructor can do, or even if you're working with a bunch of your peers, you can all hop into a session, you can go through, and then up to like 5 of you right now, but we're always looking to expand that as well, can join into a single person's code and be able to collaborate in that way. And yeah, and so like we're editing all together. We're all there. All 3 of us are in the same file right now. And we have these language service features as well. If I go to guess what grid, and what would be a good thing to put a definition on? If I click on, can't see. If I were, and since this code isn't running on my side, I can go to definition on that, and it will highlight up above where that signatures is defined. If it was defined in another file, it would go to the other file where that definition is located. So this is like the beauty of like being able to use Node and whatever else like for those kind of language service features. Yeah.
Cool. So this is kind of LiveShare in a nutshell. Who so far, based off what we've seen, thinks that it could be useful for some of the scenarios that they've run into?
So we can do one more thing on top of that. So what Dayton can do is he can pop a shared terminal. So when it comes to web development, it becomes really important for you to like execute commands off your terminal. And so with LiveShare, we created this ability for Dayton to create a shared terminal. And it can be a read-only or a read-write terminal. And I can see him typing in this terminal, and I have access to his computer. So what I can do is so he's typing, hi. What I can do is I can type as well. And with that, I can do ls, or if he was on a Windows machine, you could do dir, or you can execute all these different commands. And it's running the command on their machine, so you get access to that. So one thing that we can do in this project is npm start. What that will do is it will start running the app. You can run unit tests, you can run all these different commands, and I will see the output of that in the terminal, and it will start running. So this is already running, and so
again, this isn't stuff that's running on John's machine. This is all running on Dayton's machine at this point.
So yeah, let me run a unit test. So I'm going to run npm test. It's going to start running the test, and we'll see that it passes. Big surprise, yay. So yeah, so with this terminal, like you're able, we wanted to like expose a bunch of these primitives when it comes to development and being able to collaborate effectively using these different things. So you can mix and match what you're using. Like you can use a terminal or a shared server, like Anthony said about like sharing a SQL server. We've done a demo where we took a MongoDB and we exposed the port, and then like on my machine, I was making edits to the DB, and it was reflected on the running app on Anthony's machine. So you have all these different ways to be able to collaborate more effectively when you're with teams. And even though right now we're beside each other, it can be someone who's across the country, who's in a plane. You have all those different abilities to do that. So let me see. Yeah, that was our Node.js demo. So just to reiterate what we kind of showed, so what is LiveShare? So what LiveShare is real-time collaborative development from the comfort of your favorite tools. And hopefully, like from these demos, you kind of got an idea of how this applies to that. So it's real-time in that we're all in there, up to like the three of us were in there, more people could have been in there. We were all collaborating. We could all be typing together, highlighting, going into different parts in the code to be able to do it in real time and see those changes reflected on the code in real time. Collaborative in that we were able to develop and create things together collaboratively while like we were off, while someone could be off in a different file or a different folder and making those kinds of edits, and they're still able to effectively add to the project. And for the comfort of your favorite tools. So, like you saw, we all had different themes for Visual Studio Code. My VS had like giant fonts. It's all configured how we like our own editors. And I know like a lot of you have probably already developed your own favorite quirks or different ways, like how you lay out your windows in your Visual Studio. It's something that's like really personal to you, and you want to keep that when you're collaborating, because at the end of the day, that was really important for us, where if you make someone use a tool that they're not familiar with, they're not going to love it. They're going to use it maybe once. It's like, oh, this is really cool, and just forget about it. You want it to be from the comfort of your own tools because it's really personal to you, and you're able to use it, and it feels familiar to you. So yeah. So that was like kind of an overview of LiveShare, and that was just from us. One thing that I wanted to do is kind of open this floor. So talk to Michelle. So she's the one who helped us come here. We've been talking to her for a while. She's been part of this program. We released this in a private preview back in February, and she was one of the earliest adopters of it, and we love hearing her stories about using it. So Michelle, take it away.
Hey.
Hi.
So I'm Michelle. I was a student here and then an instructor about 3 years ago, I think. And I've been working contracting roles since then, and I'm currently working a contract role at Nike as a front-end developer. But outside of work, I've spent a lot of time going to different meetups, mentorship Saturdays, things like that, and helping other students going through this school or other code schools in the area, or just self-teaching. And I live out in Hillsborough. So for me, when a student would kind of send me a message and be like, hey, I'm stuck on this project, can you meet up so we can work on it? I have to figure out what day of the week I'm giving up my entire evening to drive here to downtown after work in rush hour traffic to meet up with a student and actually kind of help them go through their problem. Half the time, it was something really simple and the kind of things that you just miss when you're staring at your own code forever, like typos or misspellings or spacing issues, things like that. But it would still become a whole evening event to come drive downtown and deal with this and kind of help them out. I've since started using LiveShare and don't have to deal with that anymore. I tried using screen sharing in the past, but the connection never quite worked when people are working at coffee shops or things like that. You don't have the strongest connection, the video doesn't really work. So we had kind of given up on that, which is why I was always coming downtown. But kind of being able to do this, you jump in, you help them with the problem, and then the student can keep going. Some of the times when I would come downtown and start helping, it's, you come down for that one little problem, but then you're just kind of sitting there. And so the student's like, okay, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And instead of trying to figure it out for themselves, they're just, asking me because I'm sitting there to help them. So it's just kind of made it a better learning experience for the student by getting them to the solution quick so that they can move on. And definitely a better experience for me. I'm not in traffic so much. I don't know if there's anything else.
You have anything else you want to share about LiveShare? Or?
I'm really excited that it's out of beta
Yeah.
and that everybody can use it.
Yeah, it's publicly available now. Like I said, it's in the extension in the VS Marketplace. You can go download it. You can also hit a link. It should put it up there, but it's aka.ms/VSLS. But you can download it from there. So, and I think that's the whole demo part of it. So we can open up to Q&A. So that's what we got about LiveShare. So we wanted to open up to Q&A. I know that like we wanted to prepare like some of the questions that you wanted, like that we heard that might be asked about like our backgrounds and such. So we can reintroduce ourselves. Dayton will be in this Q&A as well. So once again, I'm John Chu. I'm a program manager on the LiveShare team, and what that involves is a lot of like talking to customers, hearing what the customer sentiment is, and trying to figure out like a lot of the features that we want to build that will make for better collaboration experiences. Along the way, like doing a lot of technical design with that and figuring out how like certain things will interact and be able to do this. Like one of the things that I'm currently working on is with LiveShare. There's a lot of we've heard some really great feedback about people saying like, oh, I'm visually impaired, and it's for the first time like I got to collaborate with my team because it's in the comfort of my own editor. So how do we continue to extend those kinds of accessibility aspects for someone who's blind? And like how do you know about what someone else is typing while they're in this project, or being able to have those kinds of accessibility moments? Anthony.
So yeah, as I was saying a little bit before, I'm one of the developers on the team. At the moment, my primary focus is bugs. So if you have run into any troubles, make sure you yell my name in MV, or anger, I should say. And at the moment, I'm looking at kind of the overall share join experience and how people get started with LiveShare. So that's what I'm doing.
I'm Dayton. I'm also a software developer on the same project. Relatively new to Microsoft, joined 8 months ago, my first job. I work on the language services, so the go-to definition stuff, the getting completion, and also a bit of our telemetry work so we can better understand how people use the product without them having to write in and tell us about their experiences, which is really useful for bothering Anthony with errors because we can find them before people start complaining about them.
Yeah. Because it's amazing how often we spot problems in the wild early. Like even the other day, we did a release, and probably within a matter of 6 hours, we realized that we had a problem that we needed to fix. And so, benefit of getting real data in.
Benefit of doing software development in this age where you don't ship a CD every 3 years. We ship the extension every week. So 5 years ago even, like we would have had to wait 3 years to put out a new release of LiveShare with fixing it for this thing, and then now we can do it the same day.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll open up to questions.
Yes.
When I'm working peer programming from someone else or instructing, a huge component that we're not getting here is audio. And whether that's going to be long term or whether we're still looking at another solution for providing that dialogue back and forth while we go.
Yeah. So right now, like currently with like LiveShare, like we've seen people use external tools like Skype or Slack, and a communication tool that they're using to be able to communicate, whether or not be like text or audio. But that's something that we're actually looking into, and that's one of the things that's coming up. We're starting to partner. We've partnered with the Skype team to like figure out how to associate like a Skype call that will automatically be connected to a LiveShare session. And so like when you start up a LiveShare session, a Skype call starts up already, and people can hop into it. So it's a little bit easier to communicate like in that
It's
way.
not like you've got to if we just said like, and this is one of the things we're trying to validate at the moment, is like, are the existing solutions good enough? And kind of like the feedback we're getting is that, let's say in a case like yours, yes, I've got Skype, okay, but then I have to, get the student to find me on Skype, I have to both accept, and then I have to wait a couple of minutes for it to show up, and then we need to go on. Whereas the context, we've already got a context established. We're both in this same session. So can we use that as the shared context instead of worrying about, flying usernames over the water, as it were, to get people connected? And so that's something that we're actively exploring at the moment.
I noticed it's cross-platform. You didn't mention that, but
Yeah.
you're on a Mac and you're on Windows.
Works on Linux too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Windows, Mac, and Linux.
Yeah, so we do, for VS Code, we do all three, and then for VS, it's Windows only. But I'm running on a VM here for the demo I was doing for VS, and so we have a pretty good mix on the development team. This isn't like 10 years ago Microsoft. We have this product needs to work on all operating systems, And so, yeah, probably a third of the team to half the team has a Mac, if not more. Turns out, like, I think we're one of the biggest purchasers of MacBook Pros.
Well, yeah, it's not just that they have Macs. I think everyone on the team has a Mac.
Yeah, everyone has access to
but
a
I think a
Mac.
third of the team prefers their Mac
Yeah.
to their Windows machine.
Like yeah, my main machine is a MacBook too.
So,
Back in the day, you weren't allowed to have a Mac at all,
At home.
anywhere.
any other questions? Yes.
Is this going to be integrated with team services and all? Again, I'm working with groups that are continually cycling through. Every week's a new set of people,
Yeah.
and one person's working on one bug, and hey, well, why don't you connect to that person? So they're going to have to track it down through using manuals.
Yeah, so it's interesting. One thing we've been looking at is, what is the notion of a team? And is that just defined by, VSTS, or is that GitHub, or is it something more ad hoc? I.e., we're at a hackathon, so that those two, neither of them might exist. And so at the moment we're looking at, okay, well, what would the user experience look like to have some notion of, the presence of a team inside a live share and be able to share and communicate that way. We're not sure how far we're going to go with that at the moment. We don't know if we necessarily want to be a fully fledged communication tool. That said, if the feedback we're going is consistent enough that that's where we need to go, that's part of the reason for being here, is to try and learn these things about how people use the product and how we want to do that. But the other way we might go with that is, we don't have an extension story at the moment for LiveShare itself, but you could imagine, if we make available to third-party extensions the context that we have, maybe someone else could add that. So, it's open at the moment.
Just really quickly to add to that is that you mentioned about like the feedback that we got. Like we're almost purely driven by the feedback that we hear from our customers. We have our backlog and all the issues exposed on GitHub, and we have people that are upvoting, contributing to the issues and providing comments and such, and that kind of helps us prioritize what kind of work we want to take on next. One of the big things that when we first did a private release of this was that we supported Windows and Mac. And one of the big feedback items that we got was like, we need Linux support. And because it got so many votes, like we were like, okay, we'll have to prioritize this, and that's why we support all three platforms.
And Linux is now responsible for over 10% of our usage.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I was just thinking, you were talking about linking Skype in order to get calls, so people would connect on share, and then it would call them on Skype if you wanted to, but you wouldn't necessarily need to
No, you
create
don't
a
have to. That would be an
communication
option.
platform inside a visual share.
Yeah.
You could add some kind of option on Skype, maybe a plugin for Skype, where people could add that function. You could add that functionality into Skype instead.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways it can be sliced and diced, and that's one of the things we're trying to work out. Like even one of the joys of being in a big company too is there's lots of different motivations that different groups have. And so trying to find the right way to pull off the user experience for our users is a big part of that. And, at some point experimentation becomes part of that. And so that's why currently we're favoring, instead of building it into the box, we're probably looking at, if we do anything, building it as an extension. And so it's optional for people to see, hey, look, is this the communication experience you want, rather than dictating it. Yeah.
I did some of this remotely, so I did some of this call in and get help type thing. And just 2 cents I thought I'd throw out is I have no need to see the face of the guy or have him see my face. That's just taking up some of my real estate. But because we would do a screen share and I would have a phone call.
Yeah.
And anyway, just
So on that, like Dayton has got a pet project he's been working on, and so what his thought is I don't want to speak for you. It's such a brilliant idea.
It's not something I'm tied to, by the way. This is just something I brought up to Anthony. But I think I agree. Like the full video it's not necessary, and it's high bandwidth. So all these problems we're talking about, where the connection is laggy, it's pixelated, that's going to still be a problem, even if LiveShare is the one doing the video transfer. But so I think the real information that the video contains is the emotional response. Like if your instructor can see that you're distressed and upset looking at your code, It's kind of a useful piece of information. It's like additional context to.
I can see the instructor going.
Yeah.
As the student, I don't care how my instructor is.
You could maybe like get a hint, like if you're on the right track, right? Like if they just look upset or pissed off, you're like, I'm probably not doing this right.
You're tapping through each line and just like reading the response to the instructor. Like,
So what we're thinking about is we could take up a top quarter of your screen with an emoji that represents.
You could just select that.
Yeah.
This is how I feel.
Very low bandwidth. You don't have to worry about being presentable when you do the live share session.
Oh, you're not kidding. Like
Is he kidding? You don't know. It's Dayton.
We'll have to wait to get feedback. Let me know. Give me the feedback, and if it's
Create an
good,
issue on
we'll
GitHub
go
and upload it.
Screen recognition and the 2 emoji. Like your computer decides he looks happy with the crying.
See, I think Apple's missing its true calling with those, the new emoji phone calls that you can do. Like, it should have been in live share. I don't know why we didn't talk to them more. Anyway, yes.
If you have port forwarding, would that be a security concern?
Yeah, so that's one of the big things at the moment. Beyond port 80 for website, if we spin that up, that's the only one we do automatically. Okay. Anything else is explicit from the host. Okay, they have to explicitly say, I want to expose 443 or 8080 or whatever other port you can think of. But at the end of the day, part of with great power comes great responsibility. If you do expose your port or you expose your terminal, that is it comes down to trust at the end of the day with some of that stuff. And so if a student is requesting help from their teacher, at least at the moment, they'd be trusting that the teacher, if they share terminal, isn't going to go format, C drive. Okay. But again, we don't share terminal by default. That's a elevation of trust, as it were. Other things we're looking at doing is, read only. So you could imagine, like, hey, look, I really don't trust my teacher. Instead of sharing a read write session, I just want to do read only. So there's lots of different things we can do to tweak some of those experiences depending on the environment you're in. And so you might want to set up, let's say that work environment you talked about before. Maybe every session is read-only to start with. And, at the moment you would have seen, based on the link, Dayton or whoever else could come into the session. It would notify me, if you're a keen observer, you would have seen a banner come up saying, Dayton just joined the session. But you could flip it and say, and we currently do support this, that I want to manually accept anyone who comes along. So I'll see them come before they get in. Yeah, I'm letting them in. And so it's very explicit action. And so there's a few. We are aware of the sensitive nature, and so it's trying to find the balance between, okay, what's the happy path that the vast majority of people will go through, and I think the vast majority of us, if we're working on a team together, we trust those people. But even then, that's why we don't automatically open ports or terminals and things like that. Again, that's an elevation of trust. So yeah. Any other? Yes.
In terms of sort of more the technical aspect, how it works, can only one user type in a certain line at a given time, or can multiple people be working on the same page?
Yeah, so just like Google Docs style, two people can be there trying to type up the same character reference at the same time. How useful that is probably not. If you were separated on that line and one person was at the end of it and the other person was somewhere else on the line, that would just work just fine. If that person who was further back on the line hit enter, it would force the person who was at the end of the line to come down. Again, just the stuff you'd expect. You wouldn't expect them to be left behind, back up.
And are there any fail-safes for in terms of troublemakers? Like if you have people goofing off and just hitting return multiple times.
So you can boot someone from a session and you can effectively ban
them. Even beyond that, in terms of talking about security features, one of the things that we also added was the ability to hide or exclude files that are included in the share. Okay. So by default, it takes the files that are in your git ignore and it doesn't share those ones out. But you can add an additional file. You can say don't share it, and using globs, and you can say don't share this folder, don't share this file. Say
you might have secrets, local secrets that you don't check in or something.
In there, yeah. or like so you can hide them or you can exclude them. So like if you hide them, if you jump to that file and someone's following you, they will go follow you into that file. But if it's excluded, they wouldn't be able to see that. So you're able to negotiate that kind of control in terms of security as like depending on who you're working with.
For the question on the control too, is it possible just to undo changes from a certain person's? So say we were typing on the same document and this person decided to just ruin a chunk of it, but I did important work for a while and didn't notice.
So it turns out if you're really geeking out on like these operational transform theories around, because there's a whole bunch of theories and algorithms that go along with two people editing or n number of people editing the one document at once. And invariably you will come across the exact problem you talked about. And we have spent way too many hours talking about this exact problem. And it's like, well, do I want global undo, as in just whatever the sequence is that it happened in, I want to undo that, or do I want just my own local undo? Okay, and what does the undo stack actually look like? So at the moment, I think default we do local undo. We try. And it does it, unfortunately, again, these algorithms aren't always 100% perfect, so we still have a couple of quirks in there. But at the end of the day, if you're wanting to do a major change from someone, we typically find, because we've done some studies on this, that people just highlight a block that someone did and delete, as opposed to trying to undo various change sets. Because it even gets more complicated because we're going between different clients. VS has a slightly different model for undo than VS Code, and so it gets complicated. And so that said, if you want to get a PhD in it and then come back and help us, we're more than happy for that to bring you on board.
You guys have questions about what it's like to work at Microsoft, to get a job at Microsoft? You got 3 Microsoft people right here.
Yeah, certainly. I want to ask about that actually. Like, since
Go for it.
Dayton, you're the newest one there, right? Yep. And just in general, like, as prospective job seekers coming to Microsoft or applying, like, Microsoft's so big and they have so many teams, right? So it's like, what do we look for? Is it just like we see some cool projects you guys are doing, and like apply to that team, or like what's it like?
So I went through the college recruiting process. So I applied to Microsoft as a whole, not to an individual team, and then got placed on a team once I ended up there. So I don't know how the applying to a particular team would look.
I could probably speak to that in a sec once you're finished.
Yeah, but I also mentioned that I've worked on 3 separate teams. I did 2 internships at Microsoft, and now I work on this team. And basically every team I've worked on, it's not something that if you gave me a choice, I'd be like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to be doing that thing. But that said, I've been very pleasantly surprised every team I've ended up on. They've all had their own unique challenges and their own delights about them. So I don't know. My advice would be it's not too productive to have your heart set on this team and this type of project, because it's mostly out of your hands and you're probably going to be happy wherever you end up. That's the great thing about software engineering.
Curious if like you chose this project, or it sounds like it's more you applied to Microsoft in general.
Well, I ended up on this team in an interesting way.
Yeah, Dayton's got an interesting history there, yeah.
I think all of us do. Yeah. Anyway, I did a research project at university on this kind of education-focused collaborative development. And so my thesis advisor actually got in touch with some Microsoft people and mentioned me to them and said, hey, I got a student who's coming to Microsoft. He did this research, and hey, you're doing the same thing. Why don't you see if he wants to join your team? Yeah. So you said you weren't too focused on applying. Whoops, sorry. Could you rephrase your question?
I love to like apply and do that. So that's why I was asking.
Probably my biggest advice, like let's say you had your heart set on joining the .NET team or ASP.NET team or VS Code team or something like that. Probably the easier ones to break into are the ones that are open source. Okay, just because it's very clear who is working on it. Okay, so you can figure that out very easily through commits, and it's also very easy for you to commit to it. Okay, and so let's say you did have your heart set on the ASP.NET team, and let's say you sent in your resume, you didn't get anything back, type of thing. Like you would respond to say no, thank you, or whatever. But let's say you didn't meet the bar. One of the best things you can do is start committing to that project. And if you start committing to that project and getting to know the developers and whatever else, at some point you'll be able to say, hey, look, I'd love to get a job, because you'll get to know the developers on the team and go from there. And so just getting involved, if it's an open source project, would be one of the biggest things. Other than that, I think, if you can figure out, like, if it's a team that isn't open source, trying to figure out, like, who's responsible or who's involved in that team in some way is probably your next best effort, and then trying to figure out how to reach out to that team directly. Otherwise, if you go through the more global entry process, at some point you'll get asked, okay, well, what team do you want to be a part of? And then go from there. But also keep an eye out on the job listings. So a lot of those are for very specific groups. So.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with contributing to open source. That's the most valuable part of your resume. Like, if you want to know if this person writes good code, look at the code they write. That's so much more informative than looking at what they write on a whiteboard during a 30-minute interview process, right? So I think you can't go wrong. You'll get to know the members of the team of the project you're contributing to, and you'll have it on your resume, because I think a lot of companies now look at your GitHub commit history to get an idea if you're a good candidate.
And I think, like, even with that, like, in a broader sense, it's about, like, your portfolio when you're looking for jobs. It's like everyone's like building a website, they're putting up the projects, and you want something that's out there, that's shipped, and like open source is a really easy way to do that, where you're contributing and you have that history. But like even beyond that, like you have like public websites that you made, or like things that you worked on, and you can point to, this is what I worked on. Because when you go in for an interview as well, like there's obviously the whiteboarding and such, and like for PM it's a little bit different. Like there is still whiteboarding, but at least for my interview, there's also other aspects where you're talking about the projects that you worked on, and you have to be able to point out like what you learned from that, and be able to like, it's not just like I wrote this many lines of code, it was in this language and whatnot. You have to like be able to like fully understand like why, like what you learned from this project, like what were the detractors for like using certain decisions and architecture decisions, to be able to do that, to be able to really show that you know what you were working on, to be able to talk through it when you're in an interview.
And I think that applies for a lot of things. Like let's say I wanted to change and I wanted to go to Facebook and work on React. I'm probably not going to apply and then say to the team, like, hey, can I work here? They're going to say, well, we've got hundreds of other people who have contributed to React, like in a much bigger capacity than you who have never touched a line of code of React. I might use React, but never done it. Unless you, again, got a crazy PhD in something, like, what are you going to bring to the table here? So I think that, contributing to open source projects is a phenomenal way, no matter which company it is, to get known to that company and build up street cred and build up experience, etc. That's how I got to Microsoft. It was an open source project. So, I think that's a great way to go. Any other questions? Cool. Well, thank you very much for having us. We really appreciate it. If you want to come up and ask us any questions after this, feel free.
Hope you can try out live share.
Yeah. Please try it live share. We're keen to get feedback. Okay. So whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly, we really want to make the product better. Right. Thank you very much, everyone.
How about a hand for our speakers? Cool. Yeah, feel free to stick around. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you so much for coming. Cheers.
Oh yeah, surprisingly, a lot of the technical challenges they get right away.
I will probably
the difficulty is having multiple people editing the same file at the same time.
Good. Awesome. When are you going?
Yeah, tonight probably. How bad is traffic?
For the first 15 miles.
That's fine.
We do exactly the same thing across the river. So it's like, even if with that, even if quite frankly, the fact that I set up, I can navigate independently and all these sorts of things. Yeah, for fun. So it's a
turn it on.
So it's good.
Cool. How you doing? How you liking it?
Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I send you a link?
Oh, what?
Can I send you a link in your site?
Go for it.
My name's Chan.
Nice to meet you. Anthony.
Thank you.
This is Dave.
I'm
glad you could come along.
I was just impressed that you switch careers, and it seems like you take a subject, you understand it, and go for it.
Yeah, I tried. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I couldn't imagine myself doing any other thing. If you gave me $100 million and said you didn't have to work and you could do whatever you want, maybe I'd do something different. But
Hope you enjoy using it. Like, feel free to let us know how